for me, I take information in from what is obvious, it's plain. I'm not making it up. It's apparent, it's facts. And then what I also find though is that I can kind of tap into the energy that can even be behind those facts. And it's that energy that can kind of let me know if I have what I would call a wind at my back moment, or if I'm running into resistance. And so I can use that intuition to kind of say, okay, if the wind is at my back, I'm going to use that. And then we will sail through, right?
I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas.
We're the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to catalyzing innate change makers to accelerate positive change. This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, where we highlight catalysts that are creating amazing change in the world. In this season of the podcast, we're diving deep into the skills that make catalysts successful. And we have one such amazing catalyst with us today. Amy Butchko is Talent Acquisition VP at Maximus, focused on delivering IT hires at scale. She builds diverse and inclusive teams representing the newest thinking and innovations in recruiting. Accountability and goals-driven, interested in strategic vision and strong execution in the details. She's got a passion for learning and teaching with a growth mindset for people, processes, and technology. But her work superpower is her ability to execute complex marketing and technology solutions in the face of resistance, distraction, and bright, shiny objects. I'm guessing everybody out there relates to that problem. When not working, she's a scratch cook, a creative crafter, a mediocre potter. I don't know. We were hearing about her potting. I don't know if I buy the mediocre. A #1 cat mom, though Shannon is
also
ready
in contention.
to challenge. Yeah. And
I never have competition here, by the way. Never.
And a peak TV connoisseur. Thank you so much for being here today with us, Amy.
Thanks for having me. It's great to finally meet you guys both in person.
Right. At the same time, as we said earlier, it is a foe in real life, but it's what passes for in real life today a lot today. So we'll take it. Yeah. We would love to start by hearing how you personally relate to the concept of catalyst.
So when I heard the title for your book, I was listening to the Chad and Cheese podcast, and I was like, oh, yeah, that definitely sounds like me. So I decided to look into it a little bit more. And, so I'm going to quote you, and then I'll kind of tell you how I relate to it. So you say it's a person who takes in a lot of information, sees infinite possibility, and can't stop themselves from moving into action. And there's some words that you use there that I very, very much identify, in addition to just the title of the book. I identify very strongly with that cycle. I've repeated it many times in my career, might just have kind of completed a cycle of it. And for years, I just thought I was weird, and I would sort of have to kind of hide. And, the fact that I do think differently, sometimes what comes out of my mouth, people go, But then, as I have, been able to kind of mature the messaging a little bit, I'm able to find that I can kind of reach people a little bit better. But still, that ability to process information differently, it really speaks to the idea of it's that how you take in information and the infinite possibility when they all get mashed together, and then how the process kind of comes after that. So with the help of some encouragement, some therapy, and self-awareness, I've kind of gotten to peace with that differentness. So it's still pretty regular for me to hear you think differently. But now I'm definitely more aware and able to kind of navigate those spaces when that happens for me. So that's how I identify.
Thank you. And you kind of tongue in cheek said, I felt like I was weird. Now, when someone says you think differently, does that still strike the kind of weird energetic, or what happens for you now as you've seen yourself?
So it depends on who's saying it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what it really has become about is finding the rooms where that perspective is, where people are actually craving it in some spaces. They really want to hear something that is not what was the, the canned meat that was served last year. And that is something that is synthesized out of a more modern point of view. And sometimes that's what comes out of me. And so I think it's really about finding the right room. And recognizing too that just because it is a different point of view doesn't mean that I don't rank it. Like I'm not sitting over thinking this is the best and only point of view. It's really just a synthesis of kind of how I think about information and then what I decide to do with it. So for the most part, the weirdness is, I'm good with it, but there are still times where I can be a little sensitive to it.
And it sounds like it's, as you said, it depends on the room and who's there, almost a level of safety in reception of how you're thinking different, maybe perceived.
Yeah, safety is a great word.
Yeah,
it's a very modern word. It's part of it's a very, very 2022 lexicon.
We're very modern gals here, Amy.
Yep.
Well, thank you for that. And I'd love to turn us to the skills that you have learned really support you. So what have you found are the 1 or 2 essential skills that have really made you successful as a catalyst? And we'd love to hear the stories, maybe times where they've really shown, or even times where things failed in the absence of them.
Well, sometimes they can fail or succeed in the presence or absence. Being a catalyst is it's not a panacea for failure. We're still gonna do that, right? And I think it's just a matter of kind of figuring out how to move through and move past and have that kind of short memory at times with those successes and failures, right? So in terms of skills, as we were sort of preparing for this, I was going to say, intuition is the skill, but intuition is not the skill. Learning to tap into your intuition is the skill. That's the skill. And so Shannon, that was a direct from you. So thank you for that, because it really is about, we're all intuitive beings, and whether or not we're actually in touch with how we're assimilating that information, it does sometimes depend on how well we're in touch with that part of us. And, for me, I take information in from what is obvious. It's plain. I'm not making it up. It's apparent. It's facts. And then what I also find, though, is that I can kind of tap into the energy that can even be behind those facts. And it's that energy that can kind of let me know if I have what I would call a wind at my back moment, or if I'm running into resistance. And so I can use that intuition to kind of say, okay, if the wind is at my back, I'm going to use that. And then we will sail through, right? And, and also being able to recognize when you have that resistance where you're just potentially you have to wait. And then patience becomes a skill to develop, which is not one of the skills that I'm going to talk about today. But one of my favorite quotes is from William Gibson, and you guys have probably already heard it. It's the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And so it's not that some folks are necessarily ahead or behind. It's just that some things just haven't gotten to certain places yet. And so what I find is that I can create from what is possible, but just may not be apparent to other people yet. And learning that it is not apparent to other people yet has been a learning. Because sometimes things can be so obvious to me, or seem like it, that I forget that future that's already here really hasn't gotten to the moment that I'm in yet, and potentially I'm the vessel for it. So that's one of the skills. And so, this year earlier, I tore my meniscus in my right knee, and then because I didn't rest it, I broke my leg, right? So I should have rested, right? And so that tiny fracture in my shin completely sidelined my self-care regime. And with being hobbled that way and taking some months to heal, I ended up in a recovery format where I was riding my bike, and then I flew off the bike and broke my wrist. And so it was just this horrendous moment of like my body kind of saying, what's going on, girl? What are you doing here? And so what I realized through that episode is, one, I kind of became disconnected from my intuition and became very reactive. You know, my inner guidance system just wasn't functioning properly. And somewhere Ariana Huffington is smiling because, you know, she would just tell me to go to sleep, right? But you can't sleep when like everything's broken, right?
Right.
And, you know, and so the one of the biggest lessons that came out of all this for me has been about resilience and all the systems that need to function together to prevent that burnout. So, you know, so this is where that catalyst cycle, it's absolutely real. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, move fast, break shit, burn out. That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and you think this time I'm not going to burn out.
Not
This time is going to be different.
I
right?
see it coming, so it's not going to happen.
I see it coming, and therefore it is not going to happen. Sure. When you have you, well, is that in the next book?
That's a good
Yeah.
one.
That's yeah. So in any event, you know, the figuring out the kind of what I need to do to take care of me, and that's really, that's going to be very unique for every single person, right?
Yeah.
You know, for me, it had been, I had a workout schedule that was interrupted. I had a way of dealing with, you know, that was like my walking meditation. Guess who wasn't walking for a couple months, right? You know, that's the kind of stuff. And so what ended up kind of happening was I had to completely rethink what it's going to take to thrive. And so if something happens to me physically again, what do I have to fall back on? And so one of the things that has happened is, well, so I took a new job. So that was a big deal. And so I kind of changed my environment a little bit, which has been awesome. And I started my daily journaling practice that I've been trying to start for decades. I started meditating. What? Her? Right? So it's that kind of stuff that because they were really the only tools I had available to me.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, you know, if the key skill that we're bringing forward is this idea of learning to tap into your intuition, I was going to ask, how does one do that? What are the practices that help us tap in? And so I'm hearing that you had a regime that allowed that, things that included meditative walking.
Yeah.
Were there other things that were there? And then I'd love to understand that path. As you said, you had to really rethink to then create a new set of ways to tap into your intuition.
So I would say that it was unconscious, you know, so if you think of conscious competence, right? It was unconscious competence. I was doing stuff that was keeping things rolling and not realizing how big of a deal it was. Right? So it was unconscious competence. So then it is moving into the idea of conscious competence of saying, okay, so this is why you meditate. And now you have to take a deliberate 20 to 30 minutes and you have to sit there and you just have to do it. Right? And so it is taking whatever, you know, and it's going to be different for everybody. So I'm not here to like say, start meditating, but right. I mean, that may not work for you. Breath work works for some people. For some people, you don't need any of that. But it has been about just moving into conscious competence, and getting in touch with that is just beginning to ask the question, I think. And then if you can get still enough, perhaps the answer for you appears.
What's the question that we should ask ourselves?
Ooh, well, what do you ask yourself?
It related to tapping into my intuition.
Yeah.
It'll depend my why, right? Most commonly, it's going to be what am I feeling in my body? What are the signals my body's given me? But that why is often related to wanting to tap my intuition for a particular moment or something that's happening, or kind of having recognized that my body's trying to tell me something. What we're talking about here is something that's more systemic if I'm understanding right, that
Yeah.
it's right. It's like building into your daily or weekly life, as you said, what fits, ways that are going to allow you to more easily drop in with your intuition. It's like creating a container. And so if
Yeah.
we're thinking about the world that way, I'm wondering what's the key question if someone's going to do their daily journaling tomorrow and help them begin to think about this, what might they write to help prompt the inquiry?
Okay. So one of the things that you said that I think just is the key thing.
Yeah.
And we can talk about journaling in a second because I do have a perspective on that. But you said, what is going on in my body? Where am I feeling this? One of the things that has become apparent to me is that I live from the neck up a lot of times. So what's going on in my body could not be like further from my mind. So getting that barrier away, that's the trick.
Yeah.
Is getting like, where do you feel it? Because I would do these things like, and I would work with, because I work with a lot of different kinds of therapists, and they're like, where are you feeling this in your body? And I'll be like, I don't know,
Right.
and but now it's like super clear that when like when I feel something in my heart, it's a certain thing. When I feel something in my belly, it's a certain thing. And but I'm kind of just still learning that. I'm like barely competent with getting in touch with that. And I think that a lot of us may have that cerebral bias almost.
For sure.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the biggest things, is just figuring out that you do have feelings in your body that are that your whole being is engaged in whatever.
I love that. So, tell me if I'm translating it right, is that for each individual to think about what are the practices that allow me to pay attention to my body. And that looking for the pattern. So, I was kind of sharing in the moment of like, what am I feeling now? Literally before we started talking to you, I was telling Shannon, she had a conversation related to my mother's self-care and with her healthcare, not self-care. And I was feeling like vomitous in my belly, like really like feeling it there. But that's a moment. It's what are the practices that let you check in and say, hey, what emotions are here and where are those emotions giving me information in the body? And then the next time I do that practice again, having that same conversation so that I can begin to see the pattern, so that when I feel something in my left shoulder, I begin to know what this means.
Right.
And it could be meditative walking. It can be meditation. It might be journaling. As you said, it's about figuring out what works for you with the intention of cultivating intuition as a skill set.
Yep. Working with clay had been one of those practices that had done that for me. It's kind of just switching sides of the brain maybe, but almost just enabling that flow to just start breaking stuff up. Right.
Yeah.
And, because it's so easy to be smart, I guess. And but what is that even? If it's not kind of rooted in something.
My whole body started tingling when you said the switching the sides of the brain. And I think for people who might be hearing this as an abstract thing that we're talking about, it's a great framing for what is the thing that gets you out of the dominant side of your brain to the other, whatever that switch is.
Right.
Because it's disrupting something and it's allowing you to experience differently. So I love that.
Yeah. And, and one of the things I think, during COVID, a lot popped up around be creative, take on a hobby, whatever. And when I say I'm a bad potter, I'm really not very good, but I go every week and make bad pots because it gets, and that break that happened where when I couldn't do that for a while, it was a very real impact on my psyche.
Yeah.
And it's, you at that point had started the cycle of really paying attention to your body and what these activities had done. So that's just so powerful. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Well,
Amy,
I mean, lifelong practice.
and incredibly useful for our audience. And I feel like it's a deep dive into how to cultivate this in a way that we haven't talked about before. So thank
Yeah.
you. Any other skills before we move on to current challenges that you think are important for us to bring forward?
Well, we talked a little bit about journaling, and that has been an elusive practice for me because I was journaling with a capital J because I needed to say something important, right? Probably because it was operating from up here, right? And so I ended up going with a 1 line a day, which is like this much space. And so I'm holding up my fingers. It's like 2 inches of space. What?
No,
You guys are
that's
holding your head.
mind blowing. Oh, the permission, the freedom.
The permission, yes.
Oh my
yes.
God.
And so I start with what I ate because I like to cook. So so it's already in my bio. So I'm not a fraud. So I will write down what we made, what we created for dinner. And that's how I start. So tonight is red pesto pasta with salad. And that is what that is. And then from there it will be what else happened today, and then be able to just sort of start capturing. But the only trick there is you just have to do it every day and work your way into a habit, and then the habit starts to expand a little. And sometimes you have capital J journaling to do,
And other times
it's just what's for dinner.
Yeah.
It's just what's for dinner. Yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
All right. So what are the biggest challenges you're facing these days as a Catalyst leader, Amy?
So as a leader, so I read the question and I took it literally. As a leader, it's figuring out where my catalysts are.
Yes.
And making sure that they have room to roam. And making sure that the supportive players are there to do their part, right? Because you can't, I don't need 20 catalysts, right? And what's also been really interesting about the leadership journey, and I'm actually going to call out another book, which dovetails really nicely with yours. It's called The 9 Faces of HR. And here's a plug for Chris Dunn and his book. Have you read that? Have you read it? You're nodding.
No, this is new to me.
Okay. So 9 Faces of HR, it basically takes the 9 box for employee potential, but it kind of flips the script a little bit. Chris is a catalyst in his own way. But what he does is he essentially charts innovation, the ability to innovate against seniority. And what has been, I know, right? So that ability to innovate, right? Catalysts would sit heavily on the highly innovative, right? The always pushing, the can't stop yourself from whatever it is, just can't. And so that's that end of the innovation scale. But then he also kind of maps it against seniority. And what's really interesting is there's 4 boxes in the top quadrant of his chart where somebody who is, who sees themselves as an innovator kind of has a choice. And as you move into seniority, there's a diagonal where you kind of go back and you may be a little less innovative, but you're a mentor. And so for me, it has been really thinking about how to grow and develop myself, where maybe pushing the envelope isn't always the playbook that I need to be pulling from. It's going backwards into more, not backwards, but it's going up and to the left into slightly less blast for the future and slightly more toward mentoring and working with others to potentially even do more, because they have a vision for moving things forward and I can support them.
It's so important for our growing leaders, especially to hear this, right? Because catalysts are a classic in that moment that's difficult in their movement in leadership of they were so loving being in the weeds, doing the things.
Yep.
And so as you become a more senior leader, how do you extricate yourself? How do you not worry that someone else won't do it as good as you? And the call to action you've just given catalysts it so feeds that thing that drives us to stay in the weeds,
Yep.
which is you can help others learn what you learn to be more effective and help create change.
Yeah.
And that can be the new thing that hops you out of bed in the morning.
And for me, it is, I'm in a role right now where I'm doing both, but the other thing that, that fear, I think there's actually two fears, Tracy. I think it's the fear of no one will be as good as me, but there's also the fear of what if there's someone better?
Yeah.
And once you get over that,
right?
well, I'll be darned. There is someone, but let me just break the news. There is someone better.
What?
Yep. Sorry.
Amy.
We're good.
Right?
But there is someone better at this than we are. And
Yeah.
what, and in our world, but in our little corner of the universe, what can we do? Right. And what represents growth in the direction of growth for us might be a little counterintuitive. So that's kind of my different way. That's my book club mashup. Read The Catalyst, read Move Fast, Break Shit, Burnout next to the 9 Faces of HR, find where they overlap. And as a leader, you can look at how your team is coming together with the players who may need to play a supporting role. Like, I don't need you to innovate. I need all that data entered correctly.
Right.
Two different people.
Right. Yep. I love it. I love it. Thank you for that. And thank you for that book. I'm excited to check that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I happily and reluctantly handing you off to Shannon.
All right.
For our speed
rapid
round.
fire.
Okay.
Amy, what is one thing you do to get ready for a big meeting?
I write down and visualize what the outcome of the meeting is. So like for this meeting, I have my thoughts all put together. They're over here on the left. They're all written down.
Nice.
And I do that for most meetings where I set an intention and will prepare.
I think it's so great to hear at your level, because I think people think that, well, we can just show up at this level, and like the intention setting and the diligence really is important still, always, right? Okay, what is your
I think it makes the most of people's time.
Ooh,
Don't waste other people's time. Anyway, go ahead. Next question.
That's a great
guiding,
rapid fire. Great guiding principle. Favorite way to spend a free day?
So I've never been bored a day in my life. But so I love to cook. We've already talked about that. So I'll spend a Saturday making stuff for the week. Maybe I'll make a more complicated dinner. Will happen. And then, I love to take a little extra time if I can get over to the pottery studio and make some more bad pots. That's a great way to spend a free day for me.
Awesome. Favorite famous catalyst, alive or dead, and why?
Okay, so there's too many catalysts to name. And I would say that so many people have an opportunity to we all have an opportunity to show up as a catalyst at different times. But since I am today, I'm reading Bono's book right now, his autobiography, and I identify strongly with him as an artist. He's an actual rock star, but he has a humanitarian purpose and a value system that kind of shows up in everything he does. Book is fantastic, by the way. It's a little hard. It's a great listen, but he writes in poetry. So you got to kind of like get your ear trained for the way the verse kind of goes, because it's not your typical book. But one of the central themes that he calls out in his books about is compromise, and how that's kind of kept his band together. And I think that it's a lesson that most catalysts could take to heart about why compromise can be progress. And he lays it out in a much more eloquent way, because he's Bono.
He's Bono.
But yeah. He's Bono. but the catalyst lesson there is he is crystal clear on that in the book. And
literally a rock star catalyst. I love it.
He's literally a rock star.
Yeah. Always fighting for change, and has done forever.
Yeah.
Do you have a call to action for our listeners?
Stay curious. That would be the only thing. You can already tell from talking to me that I draw from ideas from a lot of different people, and will take wisdom from whatever source, any source really. If it seems like it's going to be the right feel for the moment for me. And so stay curious, and, if no is the answer, try a compromise, and maybe just consider that you may have to surrender, that you might be in the wrong room, and that it's okay to find a new one.
Surrender is such a powerful word.
Yeah.
Thank you. To our listeners, Amy, it's so great talking with you. Thank you so much for being here. I could talk for you for hours over your good food, hopefully someday. So
I know, right?
we'll have to make that
Yes.
happen.
Yes. And maybe on some crooked plates.
Yes. To our audience, thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to accelerate positive change, go to our website at catalystconstellations.com.
And be sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out. If you have other catalysts in your life, hit the share button and send a link their way.